Tonight on First Tuesday.
Well, I couldn't believe that we as human beings, and we were Americans and supposed to be, quote, civilized, were acting quite the way we were.
Death in the South American forest. We confront those responsible.
People die every day, but that's part of seeing as death.
Good evening. On the borders of Paraguay and Bolivia is a deep forest known as the Green Hell to 19th century explorers. It still shelters perhaps the last of the world's uncontacted tribes, and they call it the Chaco, their hunting grounds. But there's now another hunter in the forest, the fundamentalist white missionary searching for primitive souls to save and ready to use everything, from spotter planes to armed gangs, to bring them in. And who finances these manhunts? Well, the British, for a start, who gave £300,000 last year alone to the New Tribes Mission, a Christian fundamentalist group whose European headquarters are at Matlock Bath in Derbyshire. Many millions more are raised through church collections in the United States. First Tuesday's been looking into the disturbing reality of New Tribes Mission in South America. How can they justify what they do? And whose interests do they really serve when they grasp their good books and go out to stalk the hunting ground?
Matlock Bath, Derbyshire. These people are protesting against the hunting down, capture and deaths of South American Indians. The protesters blame these events on the work of a Christian fundamentalist sect, the New Tribes Mission. This is its European headquarters. Reports state that in December 1986, Indians from a New Tribes Mission base in Paraguay went on a contact mission to reach one of the last groups living in the forest. They took with them a Bible and a tape recorder. This is the recording of what happened. In defending their village, the forest Indians killed 5 of the mission Indians, but all were brought in. They have become converts, and the dead have become martyrs. Florida, the New Tribes Mission's international headquarters. New Tribes teach that when all the peoples in the world have been reached with the gospel, Jesus Christ will come again, and the mission targets the most vulnerable people on earth.
The tribal people are these segments of people and cultures where no work has been done, and it's among these people that we've been concerned about and have made our primary thrust to reach.
We believe that tribal peoples have a choice. There are those that say they're happier the way they are in their own societies. We don't necessarily find that to be true.
Amen. You dismissed that.
In seeking to convert the last tribal peoples on earth, they claim they follow the Great Commission.
Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature.
Their stated objective is world conquest, a command from God, backed up with some 2,700 missionaries in 24 countries. And on an annual budget of $20 million, New Tribes Mission is one of the largest missionary organizations in the world. South America is a prime target. Today, the mission works with 65 separate tribes. and it was here that their work began with the Ayoreo in 1943. The traditional lands of the Ayoreo encompass much of eastern Bolivia and northern Paraguay. For thousands of years, they have lived here as hunters and gatherers. But systematically, over the last 40 years, they have been brought in to live on mission stations. The governments of Bolivia and Paraguay have encouraged the missionaries to remove the Indians from their traditional lands, clearing the area for economic exploitation. The missionaries came here, the remote scrub forest known as the Chaco, an Indian word for hunting ground. New tribes use their aircraft to locate isolated forest groups. In 1986, the mission's pilot was Dean Latin.
I knew these Indians were in the area and existed, and usually when I make flights, I am alert to signs, and I spotted a clearing, and it drew my attention. I looked at it, and I did see a house at the southern end of the clearing. So I thought, that must be the Indians.
The Indian village sited by Dean Latin belonged to an Ayoreo clan called the Totobiagosodi, traditional enemies of the mission Indians. The village was 125 kilometers from Campo Loro, the orderly encampment where new tribes has settled the nomadic Ayoreo. Dean Latin brought news of the sighting to the mission.
When they heard that, they were quite excited because they said they were right hot on their trail several years earlier in that very area. And something occurred and they had to give up the search.
We arrived at Campo Loro uninvited and unwelcome. Here are the people who tracked down the forest Indians. After all the protests and reports, fundamental questions still remained. The missionaries have consistently denied any responsibility for the deaths. So we came to find out what actually happened.
Well, of course, originally when we first came in, it was this was no man's land, and we just came in because it was open and available. Well, these people were animistic in that all the birds were gods to them, and they feared all the birds and a lot of the animals. Most all of the birds and most of the animals in the jungle were prohibited for them to eat. And so their subsistence living was often what little fruit that the trees afforded and what few animals that were left that were not prohibited by them from their religious views to eat.
Powell at first denied that Indians had been brought in from the forest.
We haven't brought them in. They've come in on their own.
The one, of course, we heard about was 1986,
yeah.
Which was, there was a loss of life.
Yeah.
How did that occur then? How did that happen?
Our people found out where these people were. They were relatives. They wanted to go look for them and share with them that the freedom they have from not being fearful of the birds and fearful of all the animals of the jungle, but they can now live as men and women without fear of this. We did not force the people to go. We did not even encourage the people to go. They wanted to go themselves. They asked us if we would help them get up there, which we did.
But this Ayoreo contradicts Bob Powell's version of events. Domingo Unai was on the mission at the time the contact was planned. His wife's father was one of those sent out by the missionaries. They now live at an Indian settlement free from the control of the new tribe's mission and are able to speak openly.
Y ellos dicen que los misioneros piensan 15 hombres o 20 hombres para salir, para buscar todos los viejos, ¿sabes? Y dejan vi, uno ayudó a dejar vi de allá campando, sigue anotado una gente y más de 20. Y los misioneros preguntan de Javi, uno ayudó. Dice que de Javi, parece que ustedes tienen miedo con todos los viejos, ¿sabes? Y de Javi dice que no, porque de Javi sabía que es muy peligroso todos los viejos son. Y tienen que salir a ayudar mucho para buscar a ellos.
So they went in with peaceful intentions. They took no arms. They took no means of defense. The one man had his Bible in his hand, and that's all he had. And because of the fright from before, because our people in the early days, when we first started working with them, used to go out and hunt these people systematically. In fact, one time they caught them and killed 81 of them. And so why would not they be afraid? And the old chief told them one time when he came in amongst them that they weren't unarmed, and he lied to them. And so they were fearful, and maybe they were lying again.
Ellos llevaban también ama. Uno dice que llevamos un ama nomás, pero mentira eso. Mentira eso. Todos llevamos ama, alguno lleva. No sé cuánto ama que lleva la gente, pero dice que mucho ama que lleva.
And our people tried to convince them, but the one young guy whose father told him to never trust him, he just was emotionally overtaken, and you can't imagine, because we do not live in the fear that these people live in the jungle. We don't fear every night of something coming and eating us or killing us. We don't fear every day of making sure that we do everything just right so that the gods aren't offended and come and kill us. And so their motive was this. It was sad, the problem that happened, and yet there are no regrets. There are no hard feelings amongst these people.
The tape was intended to record a conversion, but instead recorded a massacre. This woman's father was among the dead. Domingo translated the taunts between the warring clans.
Gabide, watching what Yago Sibeta, Ude to what thought of it, was I teaching it. I operate about Tavo, you go by your way. What Poca was it? I thought of it was a Yago, so Ude, so Malasa because you can. Mohoyoka poison. Machete.
Philadelphia, the capital of the nearby German-speaking Mennonite colony.
Nachrichten aus Paraguay.
The radio station in Philadelphia broke the news of the massacre.
Jetzt begann ein Massaker.
The station serves the 12,000 Mennonites who have settled in this part of northern Paraguay, granted religious freedom by successive governments. In 1986, a Mennonite doctor was called out to the mission.
There had been a contact with this group of Ajureos that come out of the bush to Campaloro. They asked me if I could come out there to see those people that just had come out. And they took me out by plane at that time. We made a round through the whole grounds there. And most of these people were sick, quite sick, ill.
At Campoloro, Dr. Kertler found a people unable to deal with the trauma of contact with the outside world.
The strange thing about this was that they were lying on the ground there in the shade, they were lying, but the relatives didn't give them anything to drink. They thought if they are sick, if they get well, okay. If they don't get well, then they die. We flew in the most sick people, they were the sickest, here to the hospital.
The main problems for the forest Indians were diseases to which they had little resistance.
We gave them IV fluids, we gave them their medicine indicated, and most of them got well, but a few of them died.
Do you feel any moral responsibility for what happened, for those deaths at all?
Personally, no. 5 men were killed, that's sad. We feel real bad about that. Some of the other people when they came out, the new people when they came out, several of those died. We felt bad about that. People die every day. We don't like it, but that's part of sin is death.
The new tribe's field director in Paraguay is Fred Sammons. How can he defend the contact with a group of forest Indians which resulted in death and forcible capture?
We do not force the Indians to accept any way of life. We offer them a way of life, but we do not force them. They have a freedom of choice, and it is drilled into us from Bible school to boot camp to language school and while we're here on the field.
What makes you think, though, that your way of life is appropriate to an Indian?
We didn't say that. We said we are offering them an alternative way of life. And if they wish that, they may accept it. If they don't wish it, they don't have to accept it. This country has given us the liberty, the freedom, given them the freedom to be able to come out, to be able to present their needs, to be able to fit into a society. If they want it, it's there. If they don't want it, they don't have to accept it. That's the nice thing about it.
Why do you think the people in the forest came out?
They were offered because for one thing, the people offered them a better way, and they themselves had a hard time living where they were at, and therefore they said they would like to come out. They had wanted to come out earlier at other times, but they were afraid. They didn't know who to go to be able to come out to.
I don't believe for 1 minute that that is true. What has happened is that people went in, a lot of people went in, some of them had rifles. 5 people got killed, 4 people got injured. The people who perpetrated that, the actual killers, would not have thought, oh, these guys are offering us an alternative. They would have been terrified. They would have been terrified that people would come after them for killing. They would have been terrified because they'd been discovered, and they would have just come in because they're just frightened.
Well, you have a right to your opinion. You have a right to your opinion. If you talk with if you knew the language and could talk to the people, you would find that's not true. I mean, I'll just be just that blunt, just like you are with me. That's not true.
Why did he decide to come out at that time? Under the supervision of a missionary at Campo Loro, we questioned Cuchahawe, one of the Indians offered a better way of life in 1986. Had he come out of the forest voluntarily, as the mission insists? Despite their denials, the missionaries had organized an armed manhunt to capture forest Indians. It had happened before. In 1979, the New Tribes Mission sent 2 missionaries from the United States to the Iareo base in the Paraguayan Chaco. Jerry and Jeanette Douglas. Within 2 years, they had resigned.
Whenever I was in boot camp training back in '78, I came down here on assignment and helped renovate this whole thing. There's a lot of money that could be used to help Indian folks that's tied up here in this monstrosity. To me, it's always been a waste.
They found faults both at headquarters and in the field. The executive in Florida told them to keep their complaints and suggestions to themselves.
But they're very secretive, and they've always been that way. When we were there, they were the same way. They didn't want you telling anybody about New Tribes business, how it operates, how it goes, or anything. A good illustration is even in the training, they didn't share with us what was going on and what was really going on. And when we got to Paraguay, we experienced culture shock. And I might say that it's not culture shock from Indians either. We were in Paraguay, what, honey, a week? Before we were literally trucked 16 or 18 hours through sand and heat, incredible, from this environment to that environment overnight to a group of Indians, naked, nomadic, filthy. And yet that didn't bother me. I expected the Indians to be and to act exactly as they did. What surprised me was the missionaries and the way they treated each other and the way they treated us.
They were on the defensive to us because anytime any new people came in, I guess they were afraid that somebody was going to try to take over some of their, I don't know if it was control or maybe even try to give them new ideas, which I never understood why that would have hurt.
The Douglases' arrival in 1979 coincided with a contact mission in which 25 IRAO, including these men, were brought out of the forest. The missionaries responsible have described the terror the manhunt induced. In a letter home, one wrote, "They had to wait 3 days before all the women were rounded up. They were scared to death." They immediately contracted diseases and were treated by the new tribe's nurse, Linda Keefe.
The majority of the medical work that I saw was penicillin, was administered to nearly everybody for everything. And while penicillin is a good drug, it's counterproductive in some cases, as in the case of as the old chief that came out that had diarrhea. The penicillin kills the bacteria that he needs drastically to get rid of bacteria. But he was just getting sicker as days went on, and every day he was getting him another injection of I assume, penicillin. And it just kept getting worse and worse. It was just terrible to see a man laying in his own vomit and in his own diarrhea mess and wallowing around in it. I was disappointed. I was appalled. I couldn't believe that what was happening to him was happening. People who didn't appear to know what they were doing, and people, like as in Linda Keefe's case, if she knew what she was doing, she didn't have an attitude about her that she cared, because everything that happened was ha 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 ha, and I'm going to go down and give old so-and-so Indian another pop of penicillin in his backside, and everything was funny and very lightly taken. They put him in a small house that's made out of split palms on the sides, and he laid in there virtually for 2 more months and died. Well, I couldn't believe that we as human beings, and we were Americans and supposed to be, quote, civilized, were acting quite the way we were towards the Indians. The Indians were very much less quality of people than we were.
The nurse, Linda Keefe, still works for the new tribe's mission in Paraguay. We asked Mr. Salmons how many had survived of the group of IRAO captured in 1979.
They are part of the society there at Campoloro. They are just as healthy and happy as everybody else. They're part of the group. That's all I can tell you. I don't know. I don't have your answer.
The question is, how many have survived?
I honestly don't know.
Following what happened, did the executive in Florida not think it irresponsible for the 1986 contact to be initiated?
Well, I don't think so at all. I feel that the thing that these people have gained an advantage, and the proof of it is a multiplication of numbers of their people that, for the most part, I believe probably would have been extinct by now. Some of these groups have become smaller and smaller, and we're dying out. And today they're healthy. They have a village. They have food, and far more. They just have a knowledge of the Word of God, and they have just real hope.
For Domingo's family, hope no longer lies with the missionaries.
Porque no hay ayuda. Nosotros sabemos que esos son de americanos, tienen muchas cosas, tienen mucha plata. Y estamos pensando, parece que ese no tiene religiosa. Eso no mencioné, porque no hay ayuda. No hay.
The IRAO tragedy is captured in song, in the lament of an Indian tracked down in the 1979 manhunt and separated from his lover, who remained in the forest. Asunción, the capital of Paraguay. According to government figures, only about 40,000 Indians survive in a Paraguayan population of 3 million. Under successive governments, they have been forced off their traditional lands by missionaries and landowners. This February, a bloody coup brought the country a new military strongman, General Andrés Rodriguez. Within weeks, he called an election, seeking popular support for his regime. We used the opportunity to ask the president what a new government would do about the deaths of Indians under the control of the new tribes mission.
No conozco el caso, pero tenga la plena seguridad que mi gobierno hará justicia a ese respecto y hará seguridad a la vida del indígena. Yo expresé ahí que son ciudadanos paraguayos por una constitución de don Carlos Antonio López, de manera que debemos respetar. Respeto recíproco debe haber entre indígenas y nosotros, porque les consideramos como ciudadanos paraguayos. Entonces, ojalá que tenga tiempo.
These assurances have meant nothing to the Indians. Since the interview, no steps have been taken to pursue the case of the IRAO. They remain dependent on the American missionaries.
The priority of work right now is our spiritual teaching, getting a real good spiritual foundation based in the minds of these people. And that's our priority. Second is probably just development of the property to a place where they can maintain their own selves without having to depend upon outside support or outside influences. Our cost of operation here at Campoloro runs about $1,000 a week. Our income runs $1,200 to maybe $1,500 a week if everything goes just right. We're talking about a piece of property here that's worth, in American dollars, probably $1 million in what we have invested, the property, the machinery, the fencing, the cattle, and everything like that. We're talking about managerial skills that scare me. I can handle it. How are the Indians ever going to be able to come to a point to where they'll be able to maintain the property themselves?
Well, I don't agree with the Patron system, and I think that all of the works that I know anything about anyway are dealt with as a Patron system. And by that I mean the missionaries being in charge, or one man in charge, and everybody else having to submit to that guy and happen to have his permission to do anything, including Indians asking the missionary if they can go or come. One Indian's house was taken down, was burned down or destroyed while he was gone because he was told not to leave and go work somewhere, and he wanted to do it anyway, and so he paid the penalty of not having a home when he returned.
I try to provide work right here for them. For most of my employ, probably 100 men on an average here. We cut firewood for the colonies. With the firewood we cut, we're using that for clearing land for gardens and for pastures. The gospel has changed some of their cultural things. They know money very well. In fact, they're probably the only tribe in Paraguay that knows how to save their money. And this is one of the things that we had to do in the early days, was to teach them this, and so that they knew that a man that does not earn his own living is a man without pride. And a man without pride is destined to be eternally in poverty.
In fact, most of the mission Indians do live in conditions of abject poverty. They live here at a work camp near Philadelphia, 45 kilometers from Campo Loro. It has been set up by new tribes as temporary accommodation. Lack of work at the mission forces them to seek casual work for neighboring Mennonite farmers, work which is regularly paid not in cash, but in tokens. One man who lives here is Fernando Kumai.
Por lo menos la mayoría de los ayoreos de Campo Loro vive por aquí. ¿Más vive aquí que allá? Sí, porque allá parece que vive solamente 40 familias nomás en Campo Loro.
¿Y cuántas familias viven aquí?
Y en total somos 1000, sí. Entonces la mayoría trabaja por aquí.
Ajá.
Queremos mejorar un poco. porque en esta forma muy difícil para vivir aquí.
Sí.
The work camp is there. It is placed strictly. It's a transient place. There is not a permanent place at all. Now, that is no different than what they were in the jungle.
Do you not think that it's a place which should be made more fit for people to live in?
It could be made more fit, yes. It probably should be. It probably should be. One of the questions that I would ask in return to that is, if that was made with nice housing and everything else, would they ever go back to Campo Loro, or would they extend and develop that whole area, which is very, very limited? There's not enough land there for them to develop that as a place to live permanently. And it wasn't meant to live permanently. It was only to offer them as a place to hang their hat between jobs.
This so-called temporary work camp has been here for 10 years. Many missionaries have left in disgust at the mission's attitude to their converts. In 1 year alone, 1980, 75% of the newly posted missionaries in the Paraguayan field left, including Kathy and Tom Rathke from Charleston, South Carolina. They have decided to speak publicly for the first time.
Of course, we're not in New Tribes Mission anymore because we were differences that we saw, things that we didn't like. I want to be a missionary, which to me is a servant of Christ, to serve people, to help them where it's needed, and not to control people.
We were too friendly. We were too close to them as friends. We weren't in control, like they wanted, like a colony or like a dictatorship. You have somebody at the head of it. We weren't willing to be at the head of it. We wanted to be with them.
I think some of the missionaries that maybe have been on the field many years have gotten maybe hardened to the fact, working with the people, that they begin, I think, getting, not treating them, in a servant-like attitude, treating them more at a lower level.
There are Indians who have rejected the missionaries. These Indians belong to a group in northern Paraguay who were so disillusioned at their treatment that they moved from the mission and are now living independently on their own forest land. The man who led them to their new life is Bruno Barras.
No estaban actuando como papel de misionero, sino quería ser paternalista, de que quería tratarnos como nene, quería tenernos como siervos.
You could live like a king, and you have all these people waiting on you, and someone for one Guarani or something sweeping your porch, someone doing your wash. We felt as a family, it'd be better if we lived more like them.
The main weapon used in conversion was a concept unknown to the Indian, the fear of hell.
Por ejemplo, los misioneros que vienen a predicar en cuanto a las comunidades indígenas, hay un dicho de que, como ellos siempre dicen, está escrito de que todo lo que no se han convertido, estos por un lado irán a un infierno. Eso también puede atemorizar tanto al indígena, porque nadie quiere aún ir a un fuego. El indígena puede convertirse en un apto, pero no sabiendo bien a la realidad.
Bruno Barras worked for the New Tribes missionary Bob Powell. His wife Loida recalls her treatment by him.
Entonces pusía también su apodo que le decían Sijangue, que era malo. Y le pusieron ese nombre, porque él les tiene miedo. cuando ven por el miedo y no quiere, porque cuando ven se acerca, bueno, ¿por qué vienen? ¿Por qué se acerca a su casa o tal cosa? Y para no tocarlo y ensuciarla. Y así yo entiendo por él. Entonces los chicos no se pueden venir. Ellos son misioneros de plata. Eso es lo que para mí digo yo así. Que toditos son así, los nuevas tribus.
Nelson Gamara, trained as a New Tribes Mission pastor, left with the group.
Que nosotros nunca mezquinamos, hasta sal convidamos uno al otro para comer. Trajimos miel, algún animal silvestre, convidamos toda la población, cuidando uno al otro. Si uno viene frío, le damos camisa, le da donde puede dormir, y se cuidamos uno al otro. Esa es nuestra actitud siempre. Sin embargo, los misioneros no hacen más eso.
The Indians didn't have anything. Like, they saw us, drinking out of glasses and using cups and things like that. So they wanted something also. And I didn't realize it for a while, but when I would throw my tin cans out, we had like a area where we just put the tin cans and then burned the other things. I realized some people were rummaging through it. And so I asked what they wanted, and they explained that they wanted utensils to eat and to drink with. And so I gave that to them. And I was doing this for quite a while when I realized that the other missionaries on our station were selling these cans to them.
Y ellos venden lata de esos misioneros. Esa lata vacía. En vez de tirarlo, venden. Según lo que nos enseña, que Dios dice que si usted tiene 2 camisas, dale a tu hermano 1. Y ellos venden latas y nos dan tristeza. Ese.
One of the things that you'd have to find out is locally, what are the reasons behind those things? And is there something good going to come out of it?
What good might come out of selling empty cans to Indians?
Well, it might be the reason that they might learn that you just don't get everything for nothing in this world. That would be the only reason that I would think.
But that it's trash.
It's trash to the Western mind, but to them it's a treasure.
Does that justify us white people selling it to Indians?
I don't know if it justifies it or not. Depends on what point of view you have. But you have an opinion about it, and
well,
maybe the missionary.
Do you have an opinion about it?
I don't know what I would do in the situation. If it was for the good and I felt it was for the better, of the Indian, I might do it.
Existe también algunos misioneros que entran, pero esos también con mucho ojo. No deben intervenir las pautas culturales. Casi prácticamente que el indígena también es un parte civilizado en su campo, no como la sociedad piensa. El indígena en el mundo entero, cuando se habla en indígena, se trata como cualquier bestia. Sin embargo, el indígena es como cualquier ser humano. En sus pautas culturales tienen su forma de cómo sobrevivir esta tierra.
Having rejected the New Tribes mission, these Indians of the Chamacoco tribe are recovering their traditional religion, a religion older than Christianity. They are preparing for the Song of the Shamans, part of the ritual celebration of the creation. Each shaman decorates his body according to his status within the tribe. According to their beliefs, creation took place here on the upper reaches of the river Paraguay. Each shaman has his own song given to him in a dream in which he can call on a god for help and protection. They sing their dreams to their Indian gods. This is the song of the missionized Ayareo on a new tribe's mission base in Bolivia called Puesto Paz. Their evangelical hymn says, Jesus wants to save all the Ayareo. But the missionaries have abandoned Puesto Paz and locked their houses behind them. The missionaries' objective has been reached. They have established a fundamentalist Christian church for the Indians and gone. For the people who remain here, there is little else. Justo Nomine has no work. He cannot feed his family or keep them together.
¿Cómo se llama la hija que está en Santa Cruz?
Teresa. 11 años que no me dijo.
Yo no me
Ya.
De ella, tío.
Hijo ese. Muchos son.
Isso caigo a ver, va cair, me voy a dar te caigo.
Pues algo gente de acuerdo de gente que cae. Si se me pasó no.
Teresa works in the nearby town of Santa Cruz, beside the railway tracks.
Hacemos relación con los hombres, ellos nos pagan. 10 bolivianos nos pagan. Por necesidad lo hacemos. Dejamos, pero sí hay cómo vivir. Lo Ayoreo mucho sufre. Precisamente los viejos, nuestro padre, trabaja de apenas para comer. Por eso nosotros hemos venido aquí para ganar la vida. También ganamos y compramos, le ayudamos a nuestro padre también del campo. Pero siempre voy a ayudar a mi madre y mi padre, pues nunca voy a olvidar de mi madre.
¿Y qué piensa usted de ese trabajo que tiene que hacer su hija allá vendiéndose a los hombres blancos?
Ganake, ganake. Dia está como que ya hago que yo he tenido tan achaca. Ella está que moño. Mi papá dice que ellos vivían mucho mejor en el monte, no sufría nada ellos, dice. En cambio aquí mucho sufre, dice. Cuesta la vida, dice, para ellos aquí. Por eso ellos dicen que mucho sufre. La mayoría dice, por los misioneros. Ellos nos sacaron para que nos dejen sufrir aquí. No puede ser eso. En ese caso no nos hayan sacado del monte, dice.
And this is where Teresa lives. For many of the Ayareo who have been through the missionaries' hands, this is the end of the line. This is the only place left for them to earn money to support their families. Work is scarce, and many are forced into begging, prostitution, and theft. These shelters are home to 30 families, the legacy of the New Tribes Mission and their offer of civilization and Christianity. One who knows this is Santiago Comay.
Solamente sacó a los señoreos y le enseñó vestirse, usar camisa, usar ropa, usar calzado, comer pan, comer azúcar. comer arroz, comer toda la clase que la civilización come. Pero los nuevos tribus no le enseñó a los hebreos, cómo ganarse la vida en la civilización, cómo hacer horneado, cómo ganar la plata para conseguirse la alimentación en la civilización. Entonces, a la gente que obedecieron a ellos, que obedientemente ellos asistieron a su religión, a su culto, ellos ayudaron con alimentos, ayudaron con trabajo, ayudaron con medicina. Y el que no iba, entonces no le ayudaban, le echaban, lo arrinconaban. Entonces allí obligado el hebreo tenía que dejar toda la religión que ellos tenían, perder la religión por ir a la religión evangélica. Indudablemente el hebreo ahora tiene que hacer algo para sobrevivir. Una chica por ignorancia y por necesidad tiene que ganar su vida por su mismo cuerpo, por necesidad. Y digamos, hasta yo, si me viene la hambre y la necesidad, para tener algo yo tengo que robar. Pero no por gusto, sino por necesidad.
There is a small encampment outside Santa Cruz by the railway line. Do you know it? You've probably visited.
I know where it's at.
You know where it's at?
I know where you're speaking of, yes.
Yes. What do you think of that?
Well, we worked in Puesto Paz for quite a number of years. They're able to survive.
So why do they have to go into Santa Cruz then?
Because they choose to. You see, they're free to do that today where they never in the world ever have been able to before. They're able to go into Santa Cruz only because we went out there and befriended them, and not only befriended them and took the fear away from them as far as civilization is concerned, but also in time have seen break down the fear on the part of civilized people from the tribal people.
A last group of uncontacted IRAO has been reported in the Chaco, the hunting ground. Will the new tribes mission now try to reach them, whatever the cost?
We have not changed our position at all. We still feel that we want to somehow reach out in the love of Christ to share the message with a lost and dying people.
La necesidad en la civilización tiene que obligar a la Yorea a hacer todo lo que antes no fue así. El Yoreo en la vida nativa nunca fue como lo es ahora. Uno de los errores más grandes de las nuevas tribus, de la misión evangélica, fue de quitar las costumbres a Yorea, de quitar originalmente la vida Yorea, las costumbres a Yorea, para convertir en una vida, digamos, de civilización, de gente civilizada. Un país, digamos, tiene que morir, tiene que vivir y morir bajo sus costumbres de vida.
It's worth remembering that 1992 marks the anniversary of Christopher Columbus landing in America, the beginning of the cruel march of the conquistadores. That was almost 500 years ago, but the conquest continues, even today. First Tuesday will be back in October. Until then, good night.